I'm Christine Zips, and today I'm especially honored to have as our very special guest, Lena Pooh. Lena is a personal friend of mine, a sister. We go back about 5 years, and we've collaborated on some projects, mostly Wi-Fi in schools, but got to know one another along the way, and kind of been riding on her coattails while she's been working on this project. And I'm so honored that she has chosen this moment to, and with me as host, to reveal and launch her new notice of liability. And it's just wonderful. We're going to be dividing this into two parts. The first part will have to do with the U.S. and international overview of the notice of liability, which covers all wireless. So many people have been waiting for this moment. So excited. It'll cover all wireless, as Lena puts it, from ingestibles to satellites, as well as geoengineering and mandatory vaccines. And then the second part is going to be a special, more in-depth section specifically for communities and schools. So residents and parents and teachers will have a tool and know how to use that. But I will be introducing Lena in a moment. I would like to take a second to share with you that we've selected a special song to go in the intro and outro of this video called Stronger Now by Carol Albert. And I'm wearing her t-shirt. So I just love this tune. It's my current favorite one. So hope you like the music, and it seems so appropriate for this point in time. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Lena. I'm going to read her bio here. And Lena is an environmental researcher and designer with a BS degree in landscape architecture from UC Davis. Her past work includes being a project manager of sensitive wildlife habitat restoration for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for a number of years, working with all the alphabet agencies such as the EPA, FNW, BLM, DWR, as well as coordinating efforts between engineers, environmental scientists, biologists, lawyers, and more. Because of her strong multidisciplinary skill set, Lena can go broad and deep into understanding the complex issues behind the study of electromagnetic radiation and its effects on human biology and the environment. Lena has also accomplished several key scientific research and discoveries of harm, such as conducting a primary blood research showing the effects of Wi-Fi on the blood of a school teacher in real time, the first time a project of this type has ever been performed inside a school. And she has a video that includes this. It's an amazing demonstration, Lena. It's just, I applaud you for that. And Lena has also spearheaded a grassroots movement in her own town, fighting against the 5G, 4G deployment with limited success by gaining cell tower distancing in neighborhoods, whereas before there were no such regulations put into place. Lena, for purposes of our viewers new to this topic, would you briefly share why we all need to care about the impact of wireless technology on all living beings in the planet, especially 5G?
5G is fifth generation cellular technology. Obviously, we've had generations 1 through 4. We are now in the fifth generation, and they've already introduced the sixth generation. 1 through 4 has been a limited numbers of frequencies. And when we talk about frequencies, radio, electromagnetic, microwave radiation, it is a portion of the spectrum that doesn't reach Earth. It's blocked out by our atmosphere all the way to the ionosphere and stratosphere. All the layers of our Earth protects us from these microwaves. These, I'm going to simply say, instead of electromagnetic microwave radiation, I'll just call them microwaves. It is the same frequencies that are being used in your microwave oven, not the same power, but the same types of frequencies. So you know that microwaves impacting our environment, even at extremely, extremely low power, not the level that our regulatory agencies say is safe. It's really the lower levels, the low threshold that impacts all life on Earth because we're such sensitive. We are electrically sensitive creatures. Microbes to animals, flora and fauna, all living things have an electromagnetic signature, a resonant frequency. So when you bombard the earth with artificial, man-made, what I would call alien waves onto the earth, broadcasted in such a horrible manner through phased arrays, beamforming, omnidirectional, spiked, modulated forms of waves that are not sinusoidal, like how frequencies should exist on Earth, you're going to get all sorts of biological harm. And we are at a point in time right now, a couple years ago, when Tom Wheeler, the FCC chairperson, made a huge worldwide announcement. He said, we're going to unleash the entire spectrum of microwaves onto the earth. That is 3,000 frequencies that do not belong on earth. What are these 3,000 frequencies? It's all within the 5G. 1G through 4G is limited numbers of frequencies. Have they been impacting life on Earth? It has been. Every generation increases the numbers of frequencies that we're exposing to the planet. The 5th generation is a quantum leap. This is beyond anything we've seen between 1 through 4 generation. 5th generation, again, is the unleashing of the entire 3,000 frequencies of microwaves onto our planet. This is why this is insane. We have to do something about it. We are, as human society, humankind, the entire planet of people have to come up and rise up against this one world agenda. And this agenda is coming from the United Nations. And all the arms of the United Nations, WHO, WHO, ITU, International Telecommunications Union, UNESCO, all these are arms like the octopus. They're the arms that reach out and get connected to the local areas. This is why your city right now, every single city in the entire planet right now is facing this 5G deployment.
5G is not a technology, it is a revolution.
It's beyond nefarious. They know, okay, the government at the very, very top level know that this is harmful. I won't get into the nitty-gritty of what's behind the agenda, the intentions behind the agenda, but you can understand logically that artificial waves do not belong on Earth is going to have a planetary impact. So this is why Chris and I are here today, and I am so thankful, Chris, for your involvement all these years, your passion, your intelligence, your presentation of all the material, and your education, and your hardworking. You've never let up these last, I don't know, 5 years. I mean, we none of us have let up because we knew what was going to happen. We could see that we're leading up to this point today where we're going to get possible mandatory vaccinations. And geoengineering has just, the last few years has been insane. It's like I walk out in the summer and I barely see the sun.
Absolutely, absolutely, and we they're coming at us, as you know, from all angles, and they're spraying our skies, and they're adding the pesticides, the GMOs into the food, the soil, and we're doing this for the children. They deserve a better planet. And it's not about necessarily saving the planet, although that's important. However, our planet is designed to do just fine. It's mankind, it's the people who need the help, and they need to be aware of what's happening. We're talking about an invisible force. You can't see it, smell it, taste it, for the most part, feel it. There are those of us who are sensitive to it, and we'll be sharing some symptoms of how you can tell if you're, being exposed to this or extra exposed to this, but as well as a chart that shows the stunning and parallel increase of chronic diseases over the last 20 years, courtesy of Richard Lear, who gave a presentation on that from his paper from ResearchGate. So that is just really stunning. And in our Wired Schools group, we monitor cancer and suicide clusters from, children are being radiated from wireless devices inside and around schools. And that's when we're still at 4G. And as Lena said, 5G is not just the next step. It is a whole new monster. The technology is similar to, if not the same as, active denial system from the military, crowd control, and they are moving and deploying, which is a military term that the industry uses, these small cell antennas, big towers, antennas on the buildings. I'm sure you've all seen them increasing into your communities if you're aware and seeing what's going on. But yes, it's just it's very important that we make the time to understand. And down below in our comments, show notes, you'll see some links for some more information. And we encourage you to not take our words or our opinions as your own, but to do your own research. We're hoping to provoke curiosity today, and that you'll want to look into it and make up your own mind. And if you come to the conclusion, as we believe you will, when you're accessing credible information, not industry paid, like there have been tens of thousands of peer-reviewed published scientific studies supporting this harm. And if you believe that you want to stand up for your rights to do something about it, Lena is bringing out the cool tool that will help you do just that. So I will let her tell a little bit more about that. And if you'd like to share, Lena, why is your notice of liability so timely?
I've been fighting wireless for 5 to 6 years now. I've done everything possibly you can imagine, from writing letters to calling to meetings, individual meetings, and giving your 3-minute presentation in front of school board trustees as well as city council members. I mean, I started my own grassroots movement. And all this time, I knew where the problems were, and it was never getting solved by just complaining letters and letters. No one's really listening. And when you talk to senators, you talk to school board trustees, any person with a position of leadership, they don't take responsibility. They always say, well, look to the FCC. They're the ones who tell us it's safe. So we're doing it because we're told to do it. So they're just this empty shell of a manager or management system that's not obviously there to protect your interest, even though that's what they're supposed to be there. That's what they swore their oath on, is to do no, to uphold the Constitution and to preserve your rights to life and liberty and safety, and all the good things that America was built on.
I'm glad you mentioned that old yarn of their abiding by the FCC guidelines, so we're not causing any harm, when, as you know, those are so antiquated, around 30 years old, and they only address the ionizing radiation. Do I have that right? Sometimes I get it mixed up. The part that
non-ionizing,
the part that warms the skin, and that has been proven to not hold any water anymore. But they like to hide behind that. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of industry myths that they use. One is, it's not strong enough. The microwave is not strong enough to knock off the electrons orbiting an atom. Whereas that's such a very unscientific approach. Mm-hmm. It does other things besides ionizing, and there's a lot of methods like it bends the molecules, it knocks the molecules off of orbit. It's more of a macro level of effects, and that is huge. That actually explains all of the problems with like the voltage gated calcium channel leaks. That's how that happens. So there are things happening at the molecular level. They're not addressing them. You know, the industry and the regulatory agencies obviously do not go there. They try to get us to look at certain things, and they're decoys. So the ionizing versus non-ionizing debate, there is no debate. That is a myth, okay? We should get away from their language. I actually prefer to call non-ionizing molecularizing or molecular bending, you know, molecular destructuring. That's what microwaves do. So we should not call it non-ionizing. We should call it what it does. So that's one myth. And the other myth is the heat versus non-thermal versus the thermal levels. That's another myth that the industry likes to shield us, you know, put the wool over our head. And this is really significant because when they do their radio frequency measurements, they'll deliberately bring the levels down and say, oh, you know, it's within the FCC levels, and it's not enough to heat your tissue to a higher 1 degree Celsius, a whole body heat level. And that's actually ridiculous because the way the microwaves impact your cells, you know, it's a very micro level, and yet heat is a very macro level. So you're comparing apples and oranges when you're dealing with thermal versus non-thermal. Another myth, okay?
Absolutely.
Another myth propagated by industry.
Yes, and not to mention like the biological effects, how it can change DNA, you know, and break through the blood-brain barrier, and how children can be up to 10 times more, absorb more radiation, especially through their spinal fluid, I understand. But the children are more vulnerable than adults in orders of magnitude, and that's just so important to understand. We need to, and all of this exposure is cumulative. It affects the brain, the body, and future generations. I recently interviewed Dr. Ole Johansson, and he had come out with saying that by his predictions, he is seeing that your great 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 grandfather's generation, 5 generations from now, well, if we keep going the way we are, will very likely be unable to reproduce. So, and I asked him, I said, are we causing our own extinction? And he said, it's a very good way of putting at it, looking at it that way. So I'll be including a link to that interview about the health effects from Dr. Johansson. But, you know, Lena, but back to the document, in what context of this document, what is the context of the document in a court of law, and is it necessary to engage an attorney to serve these papers?
Very good questions. No, this is a new system. The notice of liability is actually an old way of doing things. Back in commerce, before there was any lawyers to represent you, in a world of commerce, you would have two people who would be trading a good or a product or money, service. And so they would come up with these contracts, and it would just be between these two people. We've lost that sight. You know, we're so used to this court system where we feel like we need to have a lawyer represent us. Well, that's not actually the best. Actually, what you end up doing when you bring in a lawyer is this: if this lawyer is loyal to the bar, they're actually loyal to the royal crown, not you. So you just actually gave up your rights. So the notice of liability is pulling out the individual and making them liable for the action, for the tort. And they can no longer hide behind their agency, their organization. And so, for instance, you know, the notice of liability, you have a respondent, the person you're filing this notice to, and you list them, you call them out. And what this does is it actually makes them accountable for the actions that they're allowing to happen. See, the reason why all this is happening, all the deployment of 5G, whether it's in your town, whether it's in your school, is that all the leaders think that, well, someone told me to do it. So my agency that covers me, I'm not liable for it personally. But you're saying, no, this document here is pulling you out individually. You're going to be made personally accountable for the actions that you're allowing to happen. So accountability, this is what the notice of liability is about. And with this document, this is a legal contract. So this notice of liability, you have to have witnesses, you have to have it notarized. And that makes it, official besides all the other structures of this document. You don't need a lawyer when you file it. And when you serve it to your respondents, I would recommend you serve it to certain individuals that are in position of leadership. I wouldn't necessarily serve it to the industry because they're like weeds. As soon as you knock one down, there's another one that pops up. You need to hold the leaders responsible. And that would be city council members, school board trustees, superintendents, your city manager, those type of individuals. The reason why is because what you want, the result, the action is you want them to stop or retract or to take down what was put up. The purpose of this document is for action. Okay, you want to encourage and demand, not encourage, but demand action. So you put your name on this and you put the respondent name on here. And it's a one-to-one contract saying, okay, you told me that you're going to deploy 5G in my neighborhood. I'm not too crazy about it. I'm not in agreement with this. I do not consent. And this is why I label or entitled my notice of liability. It's called Notice of Liability for Non-Consent and Injury. I didn't put any specific terms in there because I think this is enough to tell you what it is, what it's about. It's non-consent and injury. So what you're saying to the leaders or your city council members and school board trustees or whomever it is that's deploying the 5G, you're telling them, look, I'm not in agreement with this, and here's a contract that I've drafted, and it's official contract, and you're being served with this. If you cannot rebut correctly in the affidavit section all the points that I make that state it's going to harm me, if you can prove to me that it's not going to harm me in any way, then I'm in agreement with this project.
This sounds so interesting. And ever since I've been familiar with the process in general of notice of liability, coming from a real estate background, I kind of use an analogy of that when industry is planning on bringing in a cell tower, for example, or if they already have installed one, it works both ways, right, Lena? It's almost like when you have your house on the market, you're putting it out there for people who are looking for homes to consider. And if someone's interested in your home, they'll put in a contract. This notice of liability, to me, seems similar to, okay, you're wanting to do this, and I'm saying it's okay for you to do this if you can prove that it's not going to cause harm. So it's like a counter offer or an offer for, it's like a counter offer because they're in contract by doing this action. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes.
And you kind of go back and forth and negotiate and say, well, I want this house, but for this price. And I also want all these appliances. And I'll take it if we can close in 45 days. There's always conditions. So you kind of go back and forth. So I think that's a kind of an interesting way for people to get a grasp of what this is all about. And like Lena pointed out, I think it's so important. The cool thing about this is that it's giving power back to us as individuals. We are saying, I matter. And it's not, I see what you're trying to do, and it's not okay unless you can do this. So that's my counter offer. It's from one individual to another individual. For example, the head of the utility commission in your area, whatever, or, you know, city council member. And Lena, you share how to select respondents for, depending on the various applications, right? With guidelines and everything. Okay.
So the so the notice of liability can be filed to anyone, and it could be filed for anything. The way I've written this is that it covers the Internet of Things, Internet of Bodies, and Internet of Everything. So all of the devices that we're using, whether it's a small chip in your body, to your wireless device like your cell phone, to the satellites in space or cell towers or 5G in your neighborhood, it covers all of this. It took me a long time to figure out how to organize this notice of liability to be able to work this way. But the higher I went, the more it made sense. Instead of creating tons of different notice of liabilities for every individual item, it was best to actually cover one that kind of fits everything. So when you're serving this, you know, we'll talk about the NOL in the context of commerce. Why does this work? Because the United States and every country really is a commercial entity. You know, the United States has a commerce license number. So when you're in a court of law, you're actually in a commercial setting. When you're talking with, negotiating with your city council members, it's really a commercial transaction. So you really have to take your mind out of thinking they're operating on the Constitution. They're not. In fact, the flag is a completely perverted flag. It's not even the United States flag. There's gold fringe on it. There's a eagle on the pole. Both those two items destroys the power of the Constitution. It actually perverts the American flag in such a way that it shows that America is actually a commercial entity.
Corporation, right?
Means that's we're under admiralty jurisdiction, you know, under that law. So this notice of liability, we're playing on that same system. So we've never done this before. The notice of liability is so foreign to almost all of us, is because we've been so sheltered and guided by our handlers, you know, the globalists, into thinking one way when they're actually operating a different way. They keep making us think as long as we're crying, oh, you need to follow the Constitution, and the whole time they know that they haven't been following the Constitution. They don't have to in their mind, because they've created this this mirage. You know, every time you step into your city hall and you're giving your 3-minute testimony in front of your city council members, look at the flag. Are you standing in a court of are you under admiralty law, or are you really under the Constitution? So these are just really rudimentary, simple things to recognize where we stand now as individuals, where our powers lie. They've stripped us of our power. So this notice of liability is a brand new system that is old. It's an old system resurrected that we're now relearning. And it's a tool that we're trying to harness, I think, you know, to recapture. So we're using it to recapture so we can regain our powers, our individual sovereignty. So this really what this notice of liability is all about. It's recapturing our human sovereignty as living men and women.
And this is so exciting. And I know you've mentioned to me that this document itself, the contents, they are comprised of 4 steps you were sharing. Would you like to briefly take us through those?
Yes, absolutely. So the notice of liability, you serve it to the respondent, and it could be anyone again. So you give them 3 weeks to respond, and that is their grace period where they form a rebuttal. Okay, so if they choose to rebut your affidavit points, you should get that in hand before the end of the 21st day, 3 weeks. And if they choose to stay silent and they don't rebut anything within your notice of liability, then your notice of liability stands true. Then you file a notice of dishonor or notice of default. And that form, you give them 3 days to respond to. And most likely by then, if they haven't rebutted, they most likely will not respond to this notice either. But you do this because you're following your due process. It's important. You want to make sure you're in a position of honor, so that when you do take it to court to make an injunction, a demand to stop work, then the judge or the magistrate will recognize that you have followed your due process and this person has defaulted into a place of dishonor, into a position of dishonor. So that will give you leverage in getting the action, the motion you want from that judge. So the process I'm proposing really requires only 3 steps: the notice of liability, notice of dishonor, and then a file for injunction to stop work. That part requires court involvement. You can get some legal advice at that point. You don't need representation. You can still do things pro se, but at that point, depending on your court rulings, I know every jurisdiction within the state is different. Look into the types of injunctions you can file. You are in a position of honor by then because they've rebutted or they've neglected to respond to your notice of liability. And it's a short process. I'm trying to truncate it so that we can get the action and motion done as quickly as possible because we don't have much time. It's already near the end of April, and they're already deploying 5G within the schools. And if you want to get this out of the schools, we need to get this done before August. So that's what I'm proposing. This process with my notice of liability is we just file the notice of liability, give them 3 weeks to respond. They don't rebut, or if the rebuttal is not sufficient, they automatically go into notice of dishonor or notice of default.
Mm-hmm.
Give them 3 days, and then you take it before a court for an injunction to stop work, demand to stop work, because it is a tort. It is damage causing. It's harm. It's endangerment. It is a cause for endangerment.
Right. And that is the teeth, as I understand it, with your process, that you're not going for assets, but the injunction process, if they get that far, that they don't want that to happen, correct? So they will hopefully do the right thing. And like you say, this is all legal. It's done in full transparency, and we're giving them the opportunity to do the right thing. Absolutely. I think that's very important, that it's done with respect, and that we're saying, we see what you're doing, it's not okay, and this is what we want you to do or not do. So there.
Right.
But, yeah, so that's a good thing there. And what's involved also, as I understand, is an affidavit. If you'd want to maybe speak about the importance of the affidavit in this process.
The notice of liability has the affidavit section, and it's for mine is 14 pages long, and it's this I have to say it's powerful. I bring in all these hidden connections that no one's ever used for an argument, but it's so important. It is so necessary, because when people try to plead with the FCC or their city council members, they're really arguing over the wrong things. They always say, well, please look at the science. I'm not saying that don't look at the science. Well, you're talking to criminals.
Right. And
You
it's
know,
so diminishing.
yeah,
It's so humiliating to say, please don't hurt us. Please don't hurt us.
yes,
And this is more powerful, Lena, using your notice of liability, it's putting us back. We can stand strong and tall and know we are well within our rights of doing this.
yes,
And that's just so empowering, just knowing that, don't you think? Yeah.
it is. And I just want to emphasize that the notice of liability is your personal declaration. Okay, you have a physical bunches of paper, but it represents you. Okay, it starts with you first. You do not consent to this, whatever it is. That's the beginning. It's the attitude, the mindset, and the heart condition, and the action. Okay, so the heart, mind, and action combined into a solution that we're giving to you. Okay, it begins with you. All right, the condition intention begins with you. This is, a declaration, a representation of you, of where you stand. I'm just trying to make it as powerful as I can so that your intentions strike true. And this document is historically connected. It has roots in the Nazi scientists, Nazi science. This document goes back to World War II, makes all these connections all the way back to World War II. I wasn't happy with just talking about science, because when you're talking about criminals with the intention of wanting to do harm, it's not going to make sense. It's like telling a trespasser, someone who's breaking and entering into your home with the intention of stealing. You're not going to ask them, well, can you leave the family heirlooms alone and lock the door on your way out?
They don't care.
They don't care. Exactly.
Yeah.
So why are we giving giving them our excuses when they don't care?
With this document, so how do we file, and what is the process, and how do we choose our respondents?
So when you file, make sure your proof of service is done accurately and correctly. The first initial step is so vital, because you're only doing it once. Okay. Again, I want to make this process as easy for the filer as possible and as quickly. You can get all this done within less than a month. 3 weeks for the notice of liability waiting time, and then 3 days. That's 3 weeks and 3 days. That's less than a month. So make sure you study your state and how they accept what is proof of service. There are many avenues. Some states will recognize certified mail. Some states won't. Some states demand a little bit more proof, like absolute proof. Like maybe you can go through the sheriff and have the sheriff do the filing for you. You pay them a small fee.
And
And
you
then,
shared with me this morning, if I may interrupt,
yes, yes, please.
a wonderful link that we can all go to just see where our states stand and and it breaks it down. It's very clear to follow how we can decide which way to serve it. So if you want to trust the certified mail with return receipt, or if you want to engage a process server, depending on what works best within your area. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so and there's a link below for that as well. So we'll be talking about that, and you also mentioned how to choose the respondents in your the guidebook that you're compiling.
Mhm.
So that will be very handy as well. You'll find that with Lena's website below. So we're getting toward the end of this first section, Lena.
Okay.
Would you like to any final thoughts with your conclusion, call to action at this point?
The notice of liability, I realized as I was writing it, the higher purpose I went, the more it made sense. This is really a God-breathed document. It is a spiritually inspired document. And when I say it's a personal declaration, it's a personal declaration of the highest order, meaning that you represent a spiritual dimension. That's the beauty of this notice of liability, is it operates within the commercial construct, but it breathes spirituality. It's a multi-dimensional document. And I hope you can feel that, when you get to this point of wanting to file a notice of liability, at least with mine, that was my intention. So that's
Absolutely.
something, yeah, I wanted to
Regardless
bring across. It's
of whatever path we're on,
yes.
what means spirituality to you? Yes.
So there's that component too. So it's a multi-dimensional document.
It and that breathes life into it, and it comes with such an intention,
Mhm.
that there's a collective intention involved in it, which is just it's just beautiful. It really is. And when you get into the process, I believe you'll all see that. So Lena, you have created a new website. We have the URL below. It's lenasfabulousfrequencies.com. So we hope you will visit there soon. And when you sign up with Patreon, you'll gain access to the notice of liability we've been talking about and other documents, instructions, and information that go with it. And as Lena says, it's the price of 2 lattes to join. But this platform is necessary to protect the document and its users from censorship and infringement rights. So we can't, again, I'm just so delighted to be able to bring this out. Lena, thank you so much for all you've done with this and for sharing it all with us today. And I'm just honored to help make that announcement. And we're going to be bringing this segment to a close. And please stay tuned to part 2, where we'll be getting a little more detail. Lena will be sharing more, specifically with residents in your communities, about how, for example, cell towers moving in, small cells, they carry with them health impacts, but they also carry with them safety, surveillance, privacy issues that you'll want to be aware of as well. So we'll be getting into that, as well as how to express yourself to your school board, your school district, to get the schools hardwired to cancel all the lease agreements they might have for cell towers on the school grounds, Wi-Fi routers on the school buses, etc. So that's just so important. So thank you again, Lena. We will see you with part 2, and we appreciate that so much.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you.
Okay, we'll see you shortly. Bye for now.